The morning, Elara Thorne rode into Captain Marcus Morgan's war camp carrying 2 blades and wearing the armor of a dead knight. He assumed she was just another desperate soul seeking coin and glory in the king's endless border conflicts. He did not know that beneath her helm, her skin was the color of spring grass, or that when she spoke her orders were filtered through small tusks that marked her as one of the very creatures they were marching to fight. She kept her secret well, and for 3 months she fought beside his men with a ferocity that earned respect and a silence that prevented friendship. It was only on the night before what would surely be their final battle, when Marcus found her alone by the river washing blood from a wound that would not stop bleeding, that he saw her face fully in the moonlight and understood why she had never once removed her armor in anyone's presence. The revelation hit Marcus like a warhammer to the chest. He had been walking the perimeter of their camp, restless with the knowledge that tomorrow's fight against the orc warband would likely claim half his company, when he heard the sound of labored breathing near the water. His hand went to his sword instinctively, but he forced himself to approach carefully. What he found was Elara, her helm finally discarded, her usually immaculate armor stripped to the waist as she pressed a cloth against a deep gash along her ribs. Her green skin gleamed with sweat and river water. Her black hair, usually bound tight, fell in wet tangles around shoulders broader and more muscular than any human woman he had known. Her tusks, small but unmistakable, protruded slightly over her lower lip as she grimaced in pain. For a long moment, Marcus simply stood there, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were showing him. Elara must have sensed his presence because her head snapped up, and in her amber eyes he saw something he had never expected to see from the stoic warrior who had saved his life twice in the past month. He saw fear. "Captain," she said, her voice rough but steady despite the obvious pain. She made no move to cover herself or reach for a weapon. "I suppose there is no point in pretending now." Marcus found his voice with difficulty. "You are an orc." "Half," Elara corrected, still pressing the cloth against her wound though blood continued to seep through. "My father was human. A soldier, like you. My mother was a prisoner his regiment captured during a raid. He did not force himself upon her before you ask. They loved each other, though that love cost them both dearly when her clan discovered she carried a half-breed child." The clinical part of Marcus's mind that had kept him alive through a dozen campaigns was already working through the implications. Elara had fought against her own kind. She had killed orcs to protect human soldiers. She had risked everything to hide what she was, knowing that discovery would mean execution at worst, exile at best. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why join us? Why fight your own people?" Elara laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. "My own people. The orcs cast my mother out when I was born. They would have killed me as an abomination if my father had not stolen us away in the night. We lived on the frontier, moving from place to place, never staying long enough for questions to be asked. When I was 12, an orc raiding party found us. They killed my father while he tried to defend us. They killed my mother for the crime of lying with a human. They would have killed me too, but I was fast and small and I ran until I could run no more." She met his eyes with a defiance that dared him to judge her. "I have been running ever since, Captain Morgan. Running and hiding and pretending to be something I am not. I learned to fight because fighting meant survival. I joined your company because I am good at killing, and your war provides ample opportunity for someone with my particular talents. I fight orcs because orcs have never been my people. I fight for coin because coin buys food and shelter and the armor that hides what I am. That is the truth of it. Simple and ugly and practical." Marcus moved closer, his eyes on the wound that still bled freely. That cut needs stitching. You will bleed out if you try to sleep without proper care." Elara blinked, clearly surprised by his response. "You are not going to arrest me, execute me, tell the men that they have been fighting alongside a monster." "I am going to help you with that wound," Marcus said firmly, kneeling beside her. "Then we are going to talk about tomorrow's battle and what your knowledge of orc tactics might tell us about surviving it. After that, if we both live through what is coming, we can discuss what happens next. But tonight, right now, you are a soldier under my command who is injured and needs medical attention. Nothing else matters." He saw her throat work as she swallowed hard, and for just a moment the fierce warrior who had cut through enemy lines like a force of nature looked young and lost and grateful. "I have a kit in my pack," she said quietly. "Needle and thread. I was going to try to do it myself, but the angle is difficult." Marcus retrieved the kit and returned to find Elara had waded into the shallow water to rinse the wound more thoroughly. In the moonlight, her skin had an almost luminous quality, and he found himself noticing details he had never seen before. The way her pointed ears were pierced with small silver rings. The faint scars that marked her arms and shoulders, telling stories of old battles survived. The surprising grace in the way she moved despite her muscular build. She was beautiful, he realized with a start. Different from human women, certainly, but beautiful in a wild, fierce way that made something tighten in his chest. He pushed the thought aside and focused on the practical task at hand. Stitching wounds was familiar work for any soldier who had spent years in the field. His hands were steady as he threaded the needle and began the careful work of closing the gash. Elara sat perfectly still, barely flinching though he knew it must hurt. "How did you get this?" he asked, partly to distract them both from the intimacy of the moment. "Ambush on the southern ridge this morning," Elara said. "A spear got past my guard. I killed the orc who threw it before he could alert others, but not before he opened me up. I thought I could hide it until tonight, then patch myself and be ready for tomorrow." Marcus frowned as he worked. "You should have reported to the surgeon. This could have festered." "And have him see what I am? I think not." Elara's voice was wry. "I have managed my own hurts for many years, Captain. I know which wounds can wait and which cannot." "Marcus," he said, surprising himself. "If we are sharing secrets in the moonlight, you might as well call me Marcus." "Captain feels too formal for the current circumstances." He felt rather than saw her smile. "Marcus, then. A strong name. It suits you." They were quiet for a while as he finished the stitching, his fingers working with practiced efficiency despite the strange awareness humming through his nerves. When he tied off the last stitch and sat back, Elara let out a slow breath and turned to face him fully. "Thank you," she said. "You did not have to help me. Most men would have run for the nearest blade and struck me down before I could explain." Marcus cleaned the needle and packed the kit carefully, using the time to organize his thoughts. "I am not most men," he said finally. "And you are not most orcs from what I have seen. You saved Lieutenant Thorne's life at the ford. You held the line at Miller's Pass when half the company wanted to run. You have fought with honor and courage, and those are the things I value in a soldier. What you look like under your armor is less important than what you have proven yourself to be." Elara shook her head slowly. "You are a rare man, Marcus Morgan. Most humans would not be so quick to look past what I am." "Perhaps," Marcus allowed, "but I have been a soldier long enough to know that the world is not as simple as kings and generals would have us believe. I have killed orcs who were probably defending their homes from what they saw as invaders. I have fought beside humans who were cruel and vicious and cared nothing for honor. Good and evil are not so easily divided by the color of one's skin or the shape of one's teeth." He paused, then asked the question that had been forming in his mind since the first moment of revelation. "Tell me about the warband we face tomorrow. You must know how they fight, how they think. Can we win?" Elara pulled her shirt back on carefully, mindful of the fresh stitches, before answering. "The warband is led by Gorthak the Red, a chieftain known for his cunning as much as his strength. He has perhaps 200 warriors, all experienced raiders. They will not meet us in open battle where our discipline and formations give us advantage. Instead, they will try to draw us into the narrow canyon where the terrain favors their style of fighting. They will use the high ground for archers and send their shock troops to break our lines in the confined space." Marcus nodded slowly, his tactical mind already working through the implications. "We expected as much. That is why we plan to hold at the canyon mouth and force them to come to us." "But you sound as though you think that will not work." "It will not," Elara said bluntly. "Gorthak is too smart to simply charge into your spears. He will send small parties to harass you, making you think the main force is elsewhere. While your attention is divided, he will have climbers go up and around through the side passages. By the time you realize what is happening, you will be surrounded and fighting on multiple fronts. In the chaos, your formations will break, and then it becomes individual combat where orcish strength has the advantage." "How do you know this?" Marcus asked. Elara's expression was grim. "Because it is exactly how my mother's clan used to fight. Gorthak was trained in the old ways, and the old ways are effective against armies who think orcs are nothing but mindless savages. He counts on that assumption. It makes his victories easier." Marcus stood and began to pace, his mind racing through possibilities. "If we know his plan, we can counter it. Place archers on the high ground before he sends his climbers. Keep a reserve force ready to plug any gaps in our line. Use scouts to watch for flanking movements." "That might work," Elara said carefully, rising to stand beside him. "But you would need scouts who know how orcs move through rough terrain. Humans make too much noise in the rocks. They look in the wrong places." Their eyes met, and understanding passed between them without words. "You could guide them," Marcus said. "You could position our men where they need to be." "I could," Elara agreed, "but it would mean revealing what I am to more than just you. The men would have to trust me, follow my lead. Can you guarantee they will not turn on me the moment they see my face?" Marcus could not, and they both knew it. He thought of his company, good men mostly, but men shaped by years of fighting orcs, of seeing friends die in raids, of being taught that orcs were monsters to be destroyed without mercy. Asking them to trust an orc, even one who had fought beside them, was asking for a miracle. "I will speak to the sergeants," he said finally. "Tonight. I will explain the situation and make it clear that anyone who has a problem with it can face me personally. You have earned your place in this company 10 times over. If they cannot see that, they are fools." "And if they are fools," Elara asked, "what then?" "Then we fight with fewer men and worse odds, but we fight with clear consciences," Marcus said. "I will not betray you, Elara. Not after everything you have done, and not when you may be our only chance at survival tomorrow." Something shifted in Elara's expression, a softening around her eyes that made her look vulnerable and hopeful in equal measure. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you risk your command, your reputation, maybe your life for someone like me?" Marcus discovered he did not have a simple answer for that question. The truth was complicated, tangled up with things he had not fully examined himself. He respected Elara's skill as a warrior. He admired her courage in living every day under a disguise that one slip could shatter. He was moved by the loneliness he saw in her eyes, a loneliness he recognized because he felt it in himself. And beneath all of that, There was something else, something he was not quite ready to name. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said, knowing it was inadequate but unable to offer more. "Come, we need to gather the sergeants before it gets any later." The meeting did not go as Marcus had hoped, but neither did it go as badly as it might have. He assembled his 3 sergeants in his tent and told them the truth with Elara standing beside him, her face visible for the first time. Sergeant Wallace, a grizzled veteran with 30 years of service, simply stared for a long moment before shaking his head. "Well, that explains why she could always find the orc scouts before they found us," he said. "Thought she just had good instincts. Should have known it was more than that." Sergeant Quinn, younger and more hot-headed, reached for his knife before Marcus's hand clamped down on his wrist. "She fights for us," Marcus said, his voice hard. "She has bled for us. She has saved lives. Whatever your feelings about orcs in general, Elara Thorne has earned the right to be judged by her actions, not her blood, her actions," Quinn spat. "How do we know she is not a spy? How do we know she will not turn on us when the fighting starts tomorrow?" Elara spoke for the first time, her voice calm despite the tension crackling in the tent. "You do not know, Sergeant Quinn, just as I do not know if you will turn on me the moment this meeting ends. We both take our chances, and we both have reasons to be afraid. The difference is that I have spent 3 months proving my loyalty, while you have spent 3 minutes letting your prejudice speak for you." Quinn flushed, but did not back down. "I have seen what orcs do. I have pulled the bodies of children from burned villages. I have watched good men die screaming with orc blades in their guts. You expect me to just forget all of that because our captain says you are different?" "I expect nothing from you," Elara said. "But I will tell you this. I have also seen what humans do. I have seen human soldiers burn orc settlements where families lived in peace, harming no one. I have seen human lords take orc prisoners and work them to death in mines and quarries. I have seen cruelty on both sides of this war, and I have learned that the color of one's skin says nothing about the content of one's character. Judge me if you must, but judge me fairly, as you would wish to be judged." Sergeant Heath, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. "Question, if I may. Can you actually help us win tomorrow? The captain says you know how Gorthak will attack. Is that true?" Elara nodded. "I know the tactics he will use because I grew up learning them. I can position your men to counter his strategy. I can scout his movements without being seen. I can give you an advantage you would not otherwise have. Whether that is enough to secure victory, I cannot say. War is uncertain and many things can go wrong, but I can improve your chances significantly." Heath looked at Marcus. "Then we use her. I do not care if she is green, purple, or covered in scales. If she can keep more of our boys alive tomorrow, that is good enough for me." Wallace nodded slowly. "Agreed. I have fought beside her. She is solid. That is what matters." Quinn was outnumbered and he knew it. He yanked his arm free from Marcus's grip and stepped back, his face twisted with anger and something that might have been fear. "Fine. But if she turns on us, if any of the men die because we trusted an orc, their blood is on your head, Captain." "Noted," Marcus said coolly. "Now, let us discuss the plan for tomorrow. Elara, show them where Gorthak will likely position his forces." They spent the next 2 hours going over every detail of the coming battle. Elara drew maps in the dirt, explaining where the orc archers would hide, where the shock troops would mass, where the flanking parties would try to circle around. She suggested positioning men in specific locations. Using terrain features, Marcus had not even noticed to create kill zones and defensive positions. Her knowledge was comprehensive and practical, and by the end of the session, even Quinn seemed grudgingly impressed, though he still would not look at her directly. When the sergeants finally left to brief their men, Marcus and Elara were alone again in the tent. Marcus poured 2 cups of weak wine and handed one to Elara. "That went better than I expected," he said. Elara accepted the cup with a tired smile. "Your sergeants are practical men. That helped, but Sergeant Quinn will be watching me tomorrow. If I make one mistake, if anything goes wrong, he will assume I am to blame. Then we will have to make sure nothing goes wrong," Marcus said, attempting levity that fell flat in the serious atmosphere. He sighed and sat down on the camp stool, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. "I am sorry you have to go through this. It is not fair." "Life is rarely fair," Elara said, sitting across from him. "I learned that lesson young, but tonight in this moment I am grateful. You could have killed me by the river. Instead, you helped me. You defended me. You are risking a great deal, Marcus Morgan, and I want you to know that I see it and I appreciate it." Marcus met her amber eyes and felt that strange tightening in his chest again. "You would do the same for me," he said quietly. "I think you are that kind of person." "Perhaps," Elara allowed, "though I have not had many opportunities to prove it. I have spent so long hiding, keeping everyone at a distance, that I had almost forgotten what it feels like to have someone see me, truly see me, and not turn away in disgust." "I could never be disgusted by you," Marcus said, and was startled to realize how much he meant it. "You are brave and skilled and honorable. Those are the things I see when I look at you." Elara's expression softened into something Marcus could not quite read. "You are a good man, Marcus. Better than I expected to find in a world so full of hate and fear. Promise me something. If we survive tomorrow, if we somehow win this battle and live to see another dawn, promise me you will not forget this conversation. Do not let yourself think it was just the stress of combat or the strangeness of the night that made you see me as something other than a monster." "I promise," Marcus said without hesitation. "And I want you to promise me something as well. When this battle is over, you will stop hiding. No more armor concealing your face. No more pretending to be something you are not. You have done enough of that. It is time for you to be free." Elara's hand trembled slightly as she raised her cup to her lips. "That is a terrifying promise to make. Freedom means vulnerability. It means trusting that the world will not destroy me the moment I lower my guard." "Trust me," Marcus said, reaching across the space between them to take her hand. Her skin was warm, her grip strong. "We will face whatever comes together. You are not alone anymore, Elara. Not if you do not want to be." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face, and Marcus saw tears glinting in her eyes though she blinked them away quickly. "Together then," she said, her voice rough with emotion, "for tomorrow and whatever comes after." They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, sharing a silence that felt more intimate than any words could have been. Outside the tent, the camp was settling down for the night, soldiers checking their weapons one last time, saying prayers to whichever gods they favored, writing letters they hoped would never need to be delivered. Marcus knew he should be doing the same, making his own preparations, but he could not bring himself to break the connection with Elara. For the first time in longer than he could remember, he did not feel alone. The weight of command, always so heavy on his shoulders, felt lighter when shared with someone who understood what it meant to carry secrets and responsibilities that no one else could see. Eventually, practical concerns reasserted themselves. Elara needed rest to let her wound begin healing. Marcus needed to make his rounds, checking on the men, ensuring everyone understood their role for tomorrow. They separated reluctantly, but with the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted between them. Marcus watched Elara walk back to her small tent on the edge of the camp, her posture straight despite her injury, and felt a fierce protective surge that surprised him with its intensity. He was not a man who formed deep attachments easily. His life had taught him the danger of caring too much when death was always one unlucky moment away. But somehow, in the space of a few hours, Elara had slipped past his defenses, and he found he did not want to push her away. The pre-dawn hours were tense and cold. Marcus moved through the camp as the sky began to lighten, speaking quiet words of encouragement to men who looked too young to be facing what was coming. He found Elara near the picket lines, checking the horses with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. She had her armor on again, but her helm was tucked under her arm, and several of the soldiers nearby could clearly see her green skin and tusks. To Marcus's relief, none of them seemed hostile. A few looked uncomfortable, but most simply nodded to her the way they would to any other soldier preparing for battle. "The men know?" Marcus asked as he approached. Elara nodded. "Your sergeants told them last night." There was some grumbling, some angry words, but Sergeant Wallace made it clear that anyone who could not follow orders would be tied to a tree and left behind. That settled most of it. "The others are watching me, but they have not tried anything." "Good," Marcus said. He wanted to say more, to offer reassurance or comfort, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he just stood beside her, their shoulders almost touching, drawing strength from her presence as he hoped she drew strength from his. The first rays of sun were breaking over the mountains when the scouts returned with word that the orc warband was moving into position. Marcus gave the orders, and his company began their march toward the canyon where the battle would take place. Elara moved with them, but not as part of the main force. She had a different role to play, one that required speed and stealth. She would take a small group of the company's best scouts and position them in the high rocks where Gorthak's climbers would try to flank. It was dangerous work, but if done successfully, it would turn the orc chieftain's own tactics against him. Marcus watched her go, leading 5 nervous men into the rocky terrain, and had to force himself not to call her back. This was necessary. This was the plan they had all agreed on. But the fear that he might never see her again sat like a stone in his gut, and he discovered that the thought of losing her was worse than the thought of his own death. The canyon mouth was narrow, just as the scouts had reported. Marcus positioned his men in 3 tight lines, shields locked, spears ready. Archers took positions on either side where they had some elevation. It was a strong defensive position, but only if Elara succeeded in preventing the flanking attack. If Gorthak's warriors got behind them, even the best formation in the world would not save them. The waiting was always the worst part of battle. Marcus could feel the tension radiating from his soldiers as they stood in formation, eyes scanning the canyon ahead where shadows moved, and war drums began to beat a slow, ominous rhythm. The sound echoed off the stone walls, making it seem like it was coming from everywhere at once. Marcus knew it was a psychological tactic, meant to fray nerves and make men imagine threats that were not there. He called out steady commands, keeping his voice calm, reminding his soldiers of their training and their strength. The orc vanguard appeared suddenly, a line of massive warriors in crude armor carrying huge axes and spiked clubs. They formed up about 200 yards away, bellowing challenges and beating their weapons against their shields. Marcus studied them carefully, looking for signs of the main assault. He knew from Elara's briefing that this was likely just the first wave, meant to test the human defenses and identify weaknesses. The real attack would come from multiple directions simultaneously, overwhelming the defenders through sheer chaos. But that plan depended on surprise, and thanks to Elara, surprise was not going to happen. Marcus had positioned his reserves exactly where she had suggested, ready to respond to attacks from any angle. He had scouts watching the likely approach routes. He had done everything he could to counter Gorthak's strategy. Now it was just a matter of seeing if it was enough. The orc vanguard charged with a roar that shook the air. Marcus's archers fired in coordinated volleys, dropping several of the leading warriors, but the rest kept coming with the momentum of an avalanche. "Brace!" Marcus shouted, and his spearmen set their weapons, the butts planted firmly in the ground, the points angled toward the oncoming enemy. The collision was tremendous. The sound of metal on wood and flesh, the screams of wounded men and orcs mixing into a cacophony of violence. The human line bent but held, training and discipline keeping the soldiers together, even as individual orcs crashed into the shield wall with devastating force. Marcus moved behind the lines, directing reserves to reinforce weak points, calling out targets for his archers, keeping a mental map of the entire battle in his mind. It was what he had been trained to do, what he had done a dozen times before, but this time felt different because he was fighting for more than just victory. He was fighting to prove that Elara's trust in him was not misplaced. He was fighting to give her a future where she did not have to hide. The first real test came when a group of orc warriors tried to push through on the left flank, using their strength to physically shove the human shields aside. Marcus saw the danger and sent Sergeant Heath with 20 men to counter the push. The fighting there turned brutal, hand-to-hand combat in tight quarters where neither side could use formations effectively. Marcus watched Heath's grizzled face twist with effort as he personally killed 2 orcs who broke through, his sword moving with the efficiency of decades of practice. Then, precisely when Elara had predicted, the flanking attack came. 40 orc warriors appeared on the high rocks to the right, climbing swiftly down toward the rear of Marcus's position. If they had achieved surprise, it would have been a disaster. But they did not achieve surprise, because Elara and her scouts were already there. Marcus heard the shouts and screams from above and knew the ambush had become a counter-ambush. He could not see what was happening in the rocks, could not know if Elara was safe or injured or dying, but he had to trust that she could handle herself. He had his own battle to fight. The orc vanguard pressed harder, sensing that something had gone wrong with their plan, but committed now to breaking through by sheer force. Marcus gave ground slowly, letting his men fall back in good order to a secondary position where the canyon narrowed even further. It compressed the orc assault, forcing them to funnel into a space where numbers mattered less than discipline. His archers poured arrows into the packed mass of warriors, and the spearmen worked in coordinated pairs, one defending while the other struck at exposed targets. Time became elastic, stretching and compressing in the way it always did during combat. Seconds felt like hours. Hours passed in heartbeats. Marcus's world narrowed to the immediate decisions that meant life or death for his men. He barely registered the wound that opened up along his left arm when an orc axe slipped past his guard. He just kept moving, kept fighting, kept directing his soldiers with the calm authority they needed to hold their nerve. The turning point came when the orcs who had tried to flank suddenly broke and retreated, pursued by Elara and her scouts. Marcus caught a glimpse of her through the chaos, her twin blades red with blood, her face fierce and wild as she cut through an orc who tried to make a stand. She was alive. The relief that flooded through Marcus was so intense it almost made him stagger. He pushed it aside ruthlessly, focusing back on the main battle, but something had changed. Seeing Elara appear like an avenging spirit behind the orc lines seemed to energize his soldiers. They pushed forward with renewed strength, and the orc vanguard, realizing they were now the ones in danger of being surrounded, began to pull back. Gorthak himself appeared then, a massive orc in black iron armor carrying a sword that would have taken 2 normal men to lift. He bellowed something in his own language that Marcus did not understand, and the orc warriors rallied, forming up around their chieftain for what was clearly meant to be a final push. Marcus knew this was the critical moment. If Gorthak broke through now, everything they had accomplished would be undone. "With me," Marcus shouted, gathering his best fighters and moving to meet the chieftain's charge head-on. It was risky, potentially suicidal, but it was also necessary. If he could occupy Gorthak's attention, his soldiers could work on the warriors around the chieftain. Cut off the head and the body would fall. It was an old military axiom, and like most old axioms, it was true because it worked. Gorthak saw Marcus coming and changed the angle of his charge to meet him directly. They collided with bone-jarring impact, Gorthak's massive sword crashing down on Marcus's shield with enough force to crack the wood. Marcus rolled with the impact and came up inside the orc's reach, his sword finding gaps in the armor that covered Gorthak's torso. He scored a hit, drawing blood, but the wound was shallow and only seemed to enrage the chieftain further. They traded blows in a flurry of movement too fast for thought, pure instinct and training taking over. Marcus was outmatched in strength, but he was faster and more precise. He used Gorthak's size against him, staying mobile, forcing the larger warrior to constantly adjust his stance and angle. Around them, the battle raged, but for Marcus there was only the immediate threat of the sword that kept trying to separate his head from his shoulders. He might have died there, might have made one mistake too many, if Elara had not appeared at Gorthak's flank. She moved like water, flowing around the orc chieftain's guard to drive one of her blades deep into the gap between his armor plates at the hip. Gorthak roared and spun, his sword sweeping in an arc that would have cut Elara in half if she had not dropped flat and rolled away. The movement gave Marcus the opening he needed. He stepped in and drove his sword through the weak point at the base of Gorthak's neck, the blade finding the gap between helm and breastplate, sinking deep. Gorthak staggered, blood pouring from the wound. He tried to swing his sword one more time, but his strength was failing. He dropped to one knee, then collapsed forward, dead before he hit the ground. The effect on the remaining orc warriors was immediate and dramatic. They broke and ran, scattering into the canyon and the surrounding wilderness, their morale shattered by the loss of their leader. Marcus wanted to pursue, to turn the retreat into a rout, but his men were exhausted and wounded. He let the orcs go and focused instead on securing the battlefield and tending to the injured. The cost had been high. 20 men dead, another 30 wounded seriously enough that they would need extended care, but it could have been so much worse. Without Elara's knowledge and intervention, the entire company would likely have been wiped out. He found her sitting on a rock near where Gorthak's body lay, cleaning her blades with mechanical efficiency. Her armor was dented and bloodied, and there were new cuts on her arms and face, but she was alive. Marcus felt that surge of relief again, stronger now that the immediate danger had passed. "You saved us," he said, his voice hoarse from shouting orders. "You saved all of us." Elara looked up at him with those amber eyes, and he saw exhaustion and pain and something else, something softer. "We saved each other," she corrected. "That is how this works, is it not, when you fight beside someone you trust?" Marcus sat down beside her, his own exhaustion catching up with him now that the adrenaline was fading. "The men saw you fight. They saw what you did. There will be no more questions about your loyalty after today." "Good," Elara said quietly, "because I am tired of hiding. I am tired of pretending. I want to be able to take off this damned armor at the end of the day and not worry that someone will put a knife in my back while I sleep." "You will not have to worry about that," Marcus promised. "Not anymore. You are part of this company now, truly part of it. And when we return to the garrison, I will make sure the colonel understands what you did here. You have earned recognition and respect." Elara shook her head slowly. "I do not want recognition, Marcus. I do not want to be paraded as some kind of exception to the rule, the good orc who helped the humans. I just want to live my life without fear. I want to be able to walk through a village without people staring or spitting or reaching for weapons. Is that too much to ask?" Marcus wanted to tell her it was not, but he could not lie to her. The prejudice against orcs ran deep in human society. Even if his company accepted her, the wider world would not change quickly. But he could offer her something else, something that had been building in his heart since the previous night by the river. "Come with me," he said. "Not just as a soldier in my company, but as someone who matters to me. Someone I want at my side not because of what you can do in battle, but because of who you are." Elara went very still, her hands pausing in their work on her blades. "Marcus, what are you saying?" "I am saying that I care about you," Marcus said, the words coming easier now that he had started. "I am saying that when I thought you might die today, the fear I felt was not that of a commander for his soldier. It was personal, deep, terrifying. I am saying that I want a chance to see where this connection between us might lead if you are willing." "We barely know each other," Elara said, but her voice was uncertain, hopeful. "And you are human while I am half-orc. The world will not look kindly on whatever might develop between us." "The world can go to hell," Marcus said bluntly. "I have spent my entire life following rules and expectations, being the dutiful soldier, the reliable captain, the man who does what is required. For once, I want to do what I choose, what my heart tells me is right. And my heart is telling me that you are important, Elara. You are worth fighting for, worth taking risks for." Elara set down her blades and turned to face him fully. In the afternoon light, with the blood and dirt of battle on her face, she looked tired and vulnerable and absolutely beautiful to Marcus's eyes. "If we do this, if we try to be something more than just comrades in arms, it will be difficult," she warned. "People will talk, some will be cruel. Your reputation may suffer." "Let them talk," Marcus said. He reached out and gently touched her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw. "I am not afraid of difficulty. I am only afraid of living a life where I never took the chance to be with someone who makes me feel less alone in this world." Elara's breath caught, and then she was leaning into his touch, her eyes closing briefly as if savoring the contact. "You make me feel less alone too," she whispered. "I did not think that was possible anymore. I thought I had accepted that I would always be an outsider, always watching life from the edges. But you see me, Marcus. You really see me, and you do not look away. That is a gift I never expected to receive." Marcus cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had started to fall despite her efforts to contain them. "Then say yes," he said softly. "Say you will give us a chance. Say you will stop running and let yourself believe that maybe, just maybe, there is a place in this world where you belong." "Yes," Elara said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, I will try, for you, for us. For the possibility that we might build something good out of all this blood and fear and pain." Marcus kissed her then, a gentle press of lips that tasted of salt and copper and hope. It was brief because they were still on a battlefield surrounded by soldiers and bodies, but it was real, a promise sealed with the most intimate of gestures. When they pulled apart, Elara was smiling through her tears, and Marcus felt something in his chest that he had not felt in years. He felt happy. The return to the garrison 2 weeks later was complicated. News of the battle had preceded them, and Marcus found himself summoned to the colonel's office almost immediately upon arrival. He went alone, leaving Elara with the company, and spent a tense hour explaining the situation. The colonel, a career officer with more political sense than military talent, was deeply uncomfortable with the revelation that an orc had been serving in one of his companies. He was even more uncomfortable with the fact that said orc had been instrumental in winning a significant victory. "This puts me in a difficult position, Captain Morgan," the colonel said, drumming his fingers on his desk. "On one hand, I cannot ignore the fact that this orc woman helped prevent a massacre. On the other hand, regulations are quite clear about the recruitment of non-humans into military service. She should never have been allowed to enlist in the first place." "She saved lives, sir," Marcus said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. "My sergeants and I have submitted written statements detailing her contributions. The men of my company respect her and want her to remain with us. I am formally requesting that you grant her an exception to the recruitment regulations based on extraordinary circumstances and merit." The colonel sighed. "And if I refuse, if I order her discharged or arrested?" Marcus met his superior's eyes steadily. "Then you will also need to accept my resignation, sir. I will not serve in a military that punishes those who fight honorably on our behalf, regardless of their race." The colonel's eyebrows rose. "You would throw away your career over an orc?" "I would throw away my career over a principle," Marcus corrected. "The principle that honor and loyalty matter more than the color of someone's skin. If the army I serve cannot recognize that, then it is not an army I wish to be part of." For a long moment, the colonel simply studied him, and Marcus could not tell what the older man was thinking. Finally, the colonel picked up a piece of paper from his desk and handed it across. "This is an official commendation for your handling of the engagement at Gray Canyon," he said. "It mentions the role played by a scout of unusual background who demonstrated exceptional knowledge of enemy tactics. That is as much recognition as I can offer without creating a political nightmare for myself and you. Officially, your scout remains Elara Thorne, human, no further questions asked. Unofficially, as long as she serves with distinction and does not cause problems, I will look the other way regarding her actual heritage. Is that acceptable?" Marcus read the commendation quickly, noting the careful wording that told the truth without explicitly stating it. It was a compromise, not a victory, but it was better than he had dared hope for. "Yes, sir," he said. "That is acceptable, thank you." "Do not thank me yet," the colonel said dryly. "If this becomes a scandal, I will deny everything and throw you both to the wolves. Politics is a cruel business, Captain. Remember that." Marcus left the office with the commendation in hand, and a sense that he had just navigated a minefield successfully, though the ground beneath his feet remained unstable. He found Elara in the company barracks, sitting on her bunk with her armor stripped off for the first time since the battle. Several soldiers were nearby, talking and laughing with her as if she were just another member of the unit. It was a small thing, but Marcus knew how significant it was. Acceptance, even tentative acceptance, was precious. Elara looked up as he approached, and Marcus handed her the commendation without a word. She read it, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding to something like relief. "This is clever," she said. "It tells the truth and lies at the same time. Your colonel is a politician." "He is," Marcus agreed. "But he is a politician who is willing to let you stay, at least for now. That is a small victory." "Small victories are still victories," Elara said. She stood and faced him, very aware of the soldiers watching them with open curiosity. "What happens now, Marcus? Do we stay with the company? Do we request transfer somewhere else? What is the plan? Marcus had been thinking about that question constantly during the march back. His company was due for a long rest period after the losses they had sustained. The war would continue, but they would not be part of it for several months at least. It was an opportunity, one he intended to seize. "I am requesting extended leave," he said. 2 months, maybe 3. "I have accrued enough time that the colonel cannot refuse without cause. I want to go north, to the frontier territories where my family has land. There is a homestead there, nothing fancy, but it is quiet and far from the politics of the garrison. I want you to come with me if you are willing. I want us to have time away from all of this, time to figure out what we mean to each other without armies and battles and death hanging over us constantly." Elara's eyes widened. "You want to take me to meet your family?" "I want to take you to a place where we can be ourselves," Marcus corrected. "My family is just my younger brother at this point. Our parents died some years ago, and he has been managing the homestead alone. He will not care that you are half-orc. He will only care that you make me happy. And you do, Elara. You make me happier than I have been in a very long time." The soldiers had stopped even pretending not to listen now. Sergeant Wallace, standing near the door, caught Marcus's eye and nodded slightly, a gesture of approval that meant more than the old veteran probably realized. Elara seemed to struggle with her answer, emotion warring with caution, hope fighting fear. Finally, she took Marcus's hand in front of everyone, a public declaration that made her position clear. "I will go with you," she said. "I want to see this place you call home. I want to know who you are when you are not Captain Morgan, but just Marcus. And I want to find out if what I feel for you is just gratitude for your kindness or something deeper, something that might last." The journey north took 10 days, traveling by horse through country that grew progressively more wild and less settled. They left behind the structured world of military garrisons and organized towns, entering the frontier where communities were measured in families rather than streets, where the king's law was more suggestion than requirement. Marcus watched Elara relax incrementally as the miles passed. She stopped checking over her shoulder constantly. She laughed more freely. She removed her armor entirely after the 3rd day, riding in simple clothes that revealed her green skin to anyone they passed. The reaction was mixed. Some people stared openly. A few made warding signs, but others simply nodded or waved as if a human man traveling with an orc woman was nothing particularly unusual. The frontier, Marcus reflected, had its own priorities. Survival mattered more than prejudice out here. His brother's homestead sat in a valley carved by a cold, clear stream that flowed down from the mountains. The land was good for grazing and growing hardy crops, and Marcus could see that his brother Matthias had done well in the years since Marcus had last visited. The main house was larger. There were new outbuildings, and a herd of sheep grazed in the southern pasture. Matthias himself was working in the garden when they rode up, and he dropped his tools with a shout of delight when he recognized his brother. "Marcus, by the gods, you did not send word you were coming." Matthias was younger by 5 years, broader in the shoulders but with the same dark hair and steady eyes that marked them as siblings. He pulled Marcus into a rough embrace, then stepped back and registered Elara for the first time. To his credit, his expression barely changed. "And you brought a guest. Welcome to Morgan Homestead, Miss Elara. Any friend of my brother's is welcome at my table." "She is more than a friend," Marcus said, wanting to be honest from the start. "Elara and I served together, we fought together. And I am hoping she might want to stay with me for a time, if that is acceptable to you." Matthias looked between them, understanding dawning in his eyes along with something that might have been approval. "Well then, she is especially welcome. Come inside, both of you. You look like you have been traveling hard, and I have stew on the fire that should be ready soon. We can talk properly once you have eaten and rested." The homestead became a sanctuary over the following weeks. Marcus slipped back into the rhythms of farm life with surprising ease, remembering skills he had learned as a boy before military service took him away. He mended fences and mucked out stalls and helped Matthias with the endless tasks that kept a frontier homestead running. Elara worked alongside them, and Marcus discovered that she knew more about farming than he did. She had grown up on the frontier, after all, and her parents had taught her to be self-sufficient. She could plant and harvest and preserve food. She could deliver lambs and treat sick animals. She could track game through the forest and bring down a deer with her bow. She fit into the homestead's life as if she had always been meant to be there. But more importantly, she and Marcus had time to simply be together without the pressure of military duty or life-threatening danger. They took long walks along the stream, talking about everything and nothing. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set behind the mountains. They worked side by side in companionable silence, their hands brushing occasionally in ways that sent warmth through Marcus's chest. It was domestic and ordinary and absolutely perfect. One evening, about a month into their stay, Marcus and Elara were sitting by the stream as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. They had been fishing without much success, but neither minded. It was the peace that mattered, the quiet companionship. Marcus had been thinking for days about something he wanted to say, and he finally found the courage to speak. "I do not want to go back," he said quietly. Elara looked at him, surprise and confusion in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean I have been a soldier for 15 years, Marcus said. "I have fought in a dozen campaigns. I have seen friends die. I have killed men and orcs and everything in between. I am tired, Elara. Tired of the killing, tired of the politics, tired of living under orders and regulations. I want something different. I want this." He gestured around them at the valley, the homestead, the peaceful evening. "I want a life where I can wake up without wondering if today is the day I die. I want to build something instead of destroying it. And I want to build it with you if you feel the same way." Elara was quiet for a long time, her gaze distant. "You are asking me to stay here permanently, to give up soldiering and become a farmer's wife." "I am asking you to choose the life you want," Marcus clarified. "Not the life you fell into because you had no other options. Not the life you have to live because you are hiding what you are. But the life you would choose freely, knowing all the possibilities. If that life is here with me, then I will be the happiest man alive. If it is not, if you need something different, then I will understand. But I had to ask. I had to let you know what I want." Elara reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I have been thinking about the same thing," she admitted. "Thinking about what it would mean to stop running, stop fighting, stop constantly looking over my shoulder. This place is beautiful, Marcus, peaceful. I feel safe here in a way I have not felt since I was a child, but I am afraid." "Afraid of what?" Marcus asked gently. "Afraid that it will not last," Elara said. "Afraid that someone will come and recognize me for what I am and try to take this away. Afraid that you will wake up one day and realize you made a mistake choosing me. Afraid that I will fail at this quiet life because I have spent so long only knowing how to survive through violence." Marcus shifted closer, putting his arm around her shoulders. "We are all afraid of something, but fear is not a reason to reject happiness when it is offered. Yes, there are risks. Yes, the world is not always kind. But I would rather take those risks with you than play it safe and spend my life wondering what might have been. You are not a mistake, Elara. You are the best decision I have ever made." She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. They sat like that as the stars began to appear overhead, one by one, until the sky was full of light. "Then I will stay," Elara said finally. "I will try this quiet life with you. I will learn to farm and tend animals and live without constant fear. And if the world comes for us, if people try to take this away, we will face it together. I am done running, Marcus. I want to stand and fight for something worth keeping." Marcus kissed the top of her head, feeling something settle deep in his chest, a sense of rightness that he had been searching for without knowing it. "Then we will make this work," he promised. "We will build a life here that is ours, a place where we both belong." The practical arrangements took time to sort out. Marcus wrote to the garrison, formally requesting release from active duty after his leave concluded. The response took 3 weeks to arrive, during which Marcus threw himself into the work of the homestead as if already committed to his new path. When the letter finally came, it was surprisingly positive. The colonel granted the request with a note that wished Marcus well, and suggested that perhaps civilian life would suit him better anyway. Reading between the lines, Marcus understood that the colonel was probably relieved to have the complication of Elara removed from his command, without having to force the issue. Elara had no formal ties to sever. She had joined the company under a false identity, and that identity could simply cease to exist without explanation. In the eyes of the military bureaucracy, she had never existed at all, which gave her a strange kind of freedom. She was a ghost who could become real by simply staying in one place and living openly. Matthias, for his part, was genuinely pleased to have them both stay. The homestead was large enough that Marcus and Elara could build their own cabin on the northern section of the property, giving them privacy while still being close enough to share work and resources. The brothers began the construction in late summer, cutting timber from the forest and hauling stones from the stream for the foundation. Elara worked alongside them, her strength proving invaluable for the heavy labor. The cabin rose slowly, taking shape through weeks of hard work, and Marcus found a deep satisfaction in creating something with his own hands, something that would last. By autumn, the cabin was complete enough to move into, though finishing touches would continue through the winter. It was simple, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs. Elara stood in the doorway on the day they brought in their few belongings, looking around with an expression Marcus could not quite read. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I am thinking that I never imagined I would have something like this," Elara said softly. "A home. A place where I do not have to hide. Someone who wants me here not because of what I can do but because of who I am. It feels like a dream, Marcus. A good dream, but still a dream. Part of me keeps waiting to wake up." Marcus came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "It is real," he murmured into her ear. "This is real. We are real, and we have all the time in the world to make it even better." She turned in his arms, her amber eyes searching his face. "I love you," she said, the words simple but weighted with emotion. "I did not plan to. I did not think I could. But you have shown me kindness and acceptance and respect, and somewhere along the way, I fell completely and utterly in love with you, Marcus Morgan." Joy flooded through Marcus, so intense it was almost painful. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough. "I think I started loving you that night by the river when you trusted me with your secret. I have just been waiting for the right moment to say it." They kissed then, deeply and without reservation, sealing the words with action. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Elara laughed softly. "So what happens now? Do we have some kind of ceremony, make formal vows? I do not know how humans do these things." "We do it however we want," Marcus said. "We make our own rules, our own traditions. But yes, I would like to marry you properly if you are willing. Not a huge ceremony, just us and Matthias and maybe a few neighbors who can serve as witnesses. Simple and honest like everything else about our life here. Simple and honest sounds perfect, Elara agreed. When? Spring, Marcus decided. After the winter has passed and the valley is green again, we will marry in the meadow by the stream where we had that conversation about staying. That place is important to us. It seems right to make our vows there. Winter came early to the valley that year, snow falling in heavy blankets that transformed the landscape into something pristine and white. Marcus and Elara settled into their cabin, learning the rhythms of sharing close quarters, discovering small things about each other that deepened their connection. Marcus learned that Elara sang when she thought no one was listening, wordless melodies in a minor key that were surprisingly beautiful. Elara learned that Marcus talked in his sleep sometimes, muttering orders from old battles that no longer mattered. They learned to keep each other warm on the coldest nights, their bodies fitting together perfectly under layers of quilts. Matthias became a regular visitor, usually showing up with food or supplies and staying for dinner and conversation. He treated Elara with the same easy affection he showed Marcus, never making her feel like an outsider, always including her in family discussions and decisions. His acceptance meant more than Marcus could express, a validation that the choice he had made was right not just for him, but for the small family unit they were creating. The only difficult moment came in midwinter, when a group of travelers passed through seeking shelter from a storm. Marcus and Matthias could not in good conscience turn them away, so they opened the main house to 5 cold, miserable people who were pathetically grateful for warmth and food. Elara stayed in the cabin, not wanting to risk confrontation, but one of the travelers went exploring despite Matthias's clear instruction to remain in the common areas. He saw Elara through the cabin window and returned to the main house with wild accusations about orcs and danger and monsters hiding on the property. Marcus handled it with calm authority, explaining that Elara was his intended wife and a resident of the homestead, and that anyone who had a problem with that could leave immediately despite the storm. The other travelers, mortified by their companion's behavior, apologized profusely and made it clear they had no issue with Elara. The troublemaker, faced with choosing between his prejudice and freezing to death, reluctantly backed down, but the incident left Marcus shaken. It was a reminder that the outside world would not always be kind, that there would be challenges ahead no matter how carefully they built their sanctuary. He went to Elara that night after the travelers had been settled in the barn with blankets and hot food. She was sitting by the fire in the cabin, sharpening one of her blades with mechanical precision, her expression distant. "I am sorry," Marcus said. "I should have made sure none of them wandered off. This is your home. You should not have to hide in it." "It is fine," Elara said, though her tone suggested it was not fine at all. "I knew this would happen eventually. Not everyone will be as accepting as you and Matthias. Some people will always see me as a monster first and a person second. I just have to learn to live with that." "No," Marcus said firmly. "You do not have to just live with it. We will stand up to it. We will make it clear that you are welcome here, that you belong here, and that anyone who cannot accept that is not welcome themselves. This is our land, Elara, our home. We make the rules, not them." Elara set down the blade and looked at him with an expression that was part gratitude, part sadness. "You cannot fight the whole world, Marcus. Eventually, you will have to choose between defending me and maintaining relationships with the community. I do not want to be the reason you become isolated." "You are not isolating me," Marcus said, kneeling beside her chair. "You are giving me a reason to be selective about the people I allow into my life. There is a difference." I would rather have a small circle of people who see you as you truly are than a large network of people who only tolerate you because I force them to. Quality over quantity. She touched his face gently, her rough fingers tracing his jawline. How did I get so lucky to find you? Of all the soldiers in all the companies in all the armies, I ended up with the one man who would see past everything I am to who I could be. I am the lucky one, Marcus corrected. You make me better. You make me braver. You make me want to build something good in this world instead of just surviving it. That is a gift beyond measure. The travelers left as soon as the storm cleared, and life returned to its quiet rhythm. Marcus noticed that the man who had caused the trouble left a small pouch of coins on the table, perhaps as an apology or perhaps simply to assuage his conscience. Marcus gave the coins to Elara, who laughed and used them to buy seeds for a garden she wanted to plant in the spring. Winter slowly gave way to early spring, and the valley began to transform. Snow melted, revealing brown earth that would soon be green. The streams swelled with runoff, rushing and loud. Birds returned from wherever they had spent the cold months, filling the air with song. Marcus and Elara prepared for their wedding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It would be a small affair, just the two of them and Matthias, and a few neighbors who had proven themselves friendly. No priest would agree to officiate a wedding between a human and a half-orc, so they would speak their own vows and consider themselves bound by their word rather than any official sanction. The day arrived with perfect weather, warm sun, and a gentle breeze carrying the scent of new growth. Elara wore a simple dress that Matthias's late mother had made years before, altered to fit Elara's taller, broader frame. It was pale blue, the color of spring sky, and it made her green skin seem to glow. Marcus wore his best clothes, civilian garments he had purchased in the nearest town, nothing fancy but clean and well made. They met in the meadow by the stream as planned, with Matthias and 4 neighbors standing as witnesses. Marcus had worried that finding the right words would be difficult, but when the moment came, they flowed easily. Elara, he said, taking her hands in his, I vow to stand with you against whatever the world throws at us. I vow to see you as you are always and to love you for it. I vow to build a life with you that is honest and kind and full of the peace we have both sought for so long. You are my partner, my equal, my love. Everything I have and everything I am is yours, from this day until my last day. Elara's voice was steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Marcus, I vow to trust you with my true self, always, holding nothing back. I vow to stand beside you in joy and hardship, in peace and conflict. I vow to build with you rather than destroy, to choose hope over fear, to believe in the future we are creating together. You have given me a home and a family and a reason to stop running. I will honor that gift with every breath I take from this day until my last day. Matthias, acting as witness and officiant both, spoke simply. By the authority of your own free will and the witness of those gathered here, I declare you married. May your life together be long and happy. They kissed as husband and wife, and their small gathering of witnesses cheered. It was not a grand ceremony. There were no elaborate decorations or expensive gifts or formal celebrations. But it was real and honest and full of love, which made it perfect in every way that mattered. The celebration was equally simple, a meal shared around a large table in the main house, with good food and better company. The neighbors proved themselves genuine friends, welcoming Elara into their small frontier community without reservation. One of them, an older woman named Helen, even gave Elara a handmade quilt as a wedding gift. For your new home, she said warmly. Every home needs a proper quilt, and you are part of this valley now. We take care of our own." Elara was overwhelmed by the kindness, and Marcus saw her struggle to contain her emotions. She was not used to being accepted, to being seen as part of a community rather than a threat or an outsider. But here, in this small gathering of frontier people who valued character over appearance, she was finding something she had never had before. She was finding belonging. As the sun set, and their guests departed with warm wishes and promises to visit soon, Marcus and Elara walked back to their cabin hand in hand. The spring evening was cool but not cold, and the air was full of the sounds of the valley coming alive after winter's sleep. Marcus felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. After so many years of conflict and uncertainty, he had found peace. He had found love. He had found home. "What are you thinking?" Elara asked as they reached their door. "I am thinking that this is everything I never knew I wanted," Marcus said honestly. "A quiet life with someone I love in a place where we can be ourselves. No armies, no battles, no politics, just us and the work of building something good." Elara smiled, her tusks catching the last light of day. "I am thinking the same thing. I am also thinking that I am incredibly lucky to have found you, to have been brave enough to trust you with my secret that night by the river. Everything good in my life now stems from that moment of courage." "Not courage," Marcus corrected. "Necessity. You were wounded and needed help, but I am glad you trusted me. I am glad I was worthy of that trust, and I am glad we are here now with our whole lives ahead of us." They went inside their cabin, their home, and closed the door on the world outside. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles they would face as a human and an orc trying to build a life together in a society that did not easily accept such unions, they would face them together. They had each other, and that was enough. The following years proved Marcus right about the challenges, but also about their ability to meet them. There were incidents, people who refused to do business with them because of Elara's heritage, travelers who spread rumors about the orc woman living in Morgan Valley. But there were also victories, small and large, neighbors who defended Elara when strangers questioned her presence, the growth of their homestead as they expanded their farming and acquired livestock, the birth of their first child 3 years after their marriage, a daughter with her father's dark hair and her mother's amber eyes, green-tinged skin that marked her heritage, but small enough tusks that she could pass for human if she chose. They named the baby Miriam, after Marcus's mother, and she became the heart of their household, loved fiercely by both parents and doted upon by Uncle Matthias. Marcus discovered that fatherhood brought a new dimension to his happiness, a sense of purpose that went beyond his own contentment. He was building a future now, not just for himself and Elara, but for the next generation. He was proving that love could cross boundaries that society claimed were absolute. He was showing his daughter through his actions that she could be proud of all parts of her heritage, human and orc both. Elara proved to be a devoted mother, fierce in her protection of Miriam, but also patient and gentle in ways that surprised Marcus, until he remembered that she had been raised by loving parents herself, before tragedy struck. She sang to their daughter the same wordless melodies Marcus had heard her sing on winter nights. She told stories of the frontier, of the plants and animals and weather patterns that defined their valley. She taught Miriam to be strong and kind and unafraid of who she was. The war that had consumed so much of Marcus's life eventually ended, though the details were distant and unimportant to those living on the frontier. Peace came not through great battles but through exhaustion, both sides too depleted to continue fighting. Soldiers returned home, some passing through the valley and stopping at Morgan Homestead for rest and supplies. A few recognized Marcus from his military days and expressed surprise at his new life. Most were simply grateful for a warm meal and a safe place to sleep, and they treated Elara with the respect due to any frontier woman managing a successful homestead. On Miriam's 5th birthday, Marcus and Elara took her to the meadow by the stream where they had married. The little girl ran ahead, chasing butterflies and laughing with the pure joy that only children possess. Marcus and Elara walked slowly behind, holding hands, watching their daughter play. "Are you happy?" Marcus asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "I am so happy I sometimes cannot believe it is real," Elara said. "I have a husband who loves me, a daughter who is perfect, a home that is truly mine, friends who see me as a person rather than a monster. Everything I thought was impossible when I was running and hiding and fighting just to survive. You gave me all of this, Marcus. You changed my entire world." "We gave it to each other," Marcus said. "I was just as lost as you before we found each other. Just as lonely, just as unsure of what I was fighting for. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to believe in the future. We saved each other, Elara. That is how love works, I think. It is not one person rescuing another. It is two people deciding to face the world together and discovering they are stronger for it." Miriam called to them then, wanting to show them a frog she had found by the stream. They went to admire it, praising her gentle handling of the creature and helping her return it safely to the water. As they walked back to the cabin together, the three of them, Marcus felt a sense of completion. The story that had begun with a desperate revelation by a moonlit river had led to this moment, this family, this life. It had not been easy. There had been pain and fear and obstacles that sometimes seemed insurmountable. But they had overcome them through love and determination, and unwavering faith in each other. Years later, when Miriam was grown with children of her own, when Marcus's hair had gone silver and Elara's strength was still formidable but tempered by age, they would sometimes return to that meadow and remember. They would remember the night Marcus discovered her secret. They would remember the battle that could have ended everything. They would remember their simple wedding and the years of building that followed. But most of all, they would remember the decision they made to trust each other, to take a chance on something that society said was impossible, to believe that love could transcend boundaries of race and prejudice and fear. And they would know, with absolute certainty, that every challenge they faced had been worth it for the life they built together. A life of peace and love and belonging. A life where a human soldier and an orc warrior could find common ground and create something beautiful. A life that proved, in its quiet way, that the world could be better than the divisions that tried to define it. In the end, that was the victory that mattered most. Not the battles they won or the enemies they defeated, but the home they created and the love that sustained them through every trial. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of history, a single family in a remote valley choosing to live differently. But it was real and lasting and full of meaning, and that was enough. That was everything.